Welcome back again to another comparison video. As always, I am Rebecca, and this time we're going to look at some feature articles for magazines. These are longer articles in commercial magazines, not the 1 or 2 page ones. And most of the articles we have for On Tap share characteristics with these. Before we start really looking at the design, I want to talk about audience again. We're going to look at articles from Elle, Vanity Fair, and Nylon, as well as On Tap, of course. So I want us to remember the audience for each of these. Our readers are probably in a more similar demographic with those of Nylon than those of Elle and Vanity Fair. Our readers are in their late teens, early 20s, they're in college, and they come from a variety of socioeconomic backgrounds. Readers in Elle and Vanity Fair are more likely in their late 20s to early 40s, probably have already completed any post-secondary education they plan to pursue. They probably also have a full-time job or in their career field of choice. And they might have already started families. I want us to think about these things while we analyze the design of each magazine. So let's start with a spread from Elle. The first thing I see is the photo. It and the title take up half of the first page. There is no border on the photo. Next, I notice the title. It's in all caps and underlined. I also notice the section header and the caption to the title. I think that's a really interesting idea for a feature article. Since this piece is longer than some of the others, as a reader, I like having a few lines that explain what this article is about. By the title alone, I might not get a good idea of what I'm about to read, and if it's not what I expected, I might be annoyed. I like the 3 clearly separated columns. And the drop cap on the first paragraph of a new section gives me a designated place to stop reading if I need to do something. I like this feature because if someone is flipping through the doctor's office or reading between customers at their job or even, let's face it, reading on the toilet, they have a place they know they can stop reading and pick it back up the next time they start reading. So this first page has a lot of good features that I really like. The second page I'm not a huge fan of. There's a lot of text here. Also, I don't really like the middle of the page pull-out quotes. They mess up my reading, and I'm never sure if I'm supposed to keep reading down the column or if I'm supposed to read above the quote first and then underneath. Especially with the lines above and below the quote, I get a little decentered. What I would like to see here is maybe a chart explaining some of the numbers this article talks about, or a list of foods that it suggests for losing weight and keeping it off. Some kind of easy visual that I can take a look at if I get tired of reading. One reason I think this full page of text design flies in a magazine like Elle is because the opposite page is a full page ad. Here I've actually cut out the middle page and put these together, so you see this is page 360 and this is actually page 362. So on the opposite page of this full page of text, there's a full page ad, just a big picture. Since On Tap doesn't currently have ads, we have to give our readers a break within our articles with pictures, charts, and other visuals. So let's move on from here and look at Vanity Fair. I love this first page. This is my favorite type of opening for an article. It's just really interesting. There's this huge photo and an extra large title, and I just love it. If I were thumbing through this magazine haphazardly, this would absolutely catch my eye, and I'd at least read the first page. Again, the article gives a short abstract underneath the title, which is nice for very long articles. This spread also has a good balance. The left page is heavy with text, and the right is heavy with photo. I think I personally tend to put more of my text on the right page, but balance is the real key. Let's look at the rest of this article. I'm liking a lot of things about this page as well. Though it is a full page of text, and though it does have that middle of the page pull-out quote, I like a lot of things about this page more than the article in Elle. I really like this huge drop cap at the very beginning of the article. There's so much white space in the top corner that I'm not getting as anxious as looking at the full page of text that I did with the Elle article. While I don't like that the pull-out quote is in the middle of the page, I do like the format of it. I like that some lines are in italics and that some are in caps. This almost makes the quote 2 quotes. Just glancing at the page, I read the caps part first, then I read the whole thing. This could be very useful to fill up an empty space on a page with a long quote, but still draw your reader's attention to what you want them to get out of the quote the most. Though there were some minor differences between the Elle and Vanity Fair articles, they basically had very similar designs. Both used 3 columns and drop caps on the first paragraph of a new section, as well as a similar styled pull-out quote. And remember, both of these magazines have a similar audience. So now let's look at Nylon, which has a younger audience. You already know I love this spread. I'm not the biggest fan of this T being in the crease, but otherwise, this spread is a great indicator that this is a feature article. One thing to keep in mind is that every article can't start like this. I would only start one article in each section like this, otherwise it won't stick out, you know? Again, a little bit of the blurb about the article comes with the title, so let's look at the rest. I love the rest of this design also. Notice the huge difference. There is no page of just text. The pull-out quote is huge and isolated, and there's another large image. This design speaks to a different audience than those we looked at in Elle and Vanity Fair, and I think our audience is more similar to this audience than the other. What's really interesting about this design is also that what appears to be a pull-out quote at first is actually the beginning of the article. It's the first line. This works because it's the leftmost item on the spread and it's super huge. You cannot help but read it first. Also, it works because it's such an intriguing line. I want to flip to the next page just to show you how the next article follows this one. Notice we still have a large image, but it's not a full 2-page spread. I like how the title goes across the bottom of the first whole page and most of the second page. And again, we have a small abstract about the article's contents. Notice too that this article is a little shorter than the Regina Spektor one. When putting the magazine together, you won't balance within each individual design, but also overall. You don't want to bombard readers with several 3- or 4-page articles in a row. Balance it out with a single-page article like this one. So now let's see what some of our on tap articles look like and talk about how they could be better. I am, of course, a huge fan of the large image here, but I'm not so keen on the fact that it doesn't relate to the article at all. I'm also not extremely impressed by the title. It does try to be large, and I think the differentiation of the word for is really interesting, but I think we could have taken up a little less space with the photo and made some more room for the title. Or even if the photo was a little smaller, it wouldn't make the title look so small. Like the article from Elle, I'd rather see the title and photo take up half the page. This photo alone takes up about 3/4 of the page. The first paragraph of this article is the text on the first page, and I think it does a pretty decent job at introducing the reader to the rest of the story. I do not think the rest of the design does a good job at being accessible for a reader, though. The full page of text is heavy, and there's no extra leading between the lines, and the 2 columns don't give a whole lot of white space. Also, the middle of the page pull-out quote feels very small. I would have rather seen, again, a smaller front page photo so that some of the text from this second page could have been on the first page. Then this article would be a good one to place around a larger 3- or 4-page article. Let's look at another on-tap design. First impression, I like it. The image and title take up about half of the first page, and the 3 columns give plenty of white space around the text. I also like that there's a little bit of a tag beneath the title so I can get somewhat of an idea of the article's contents. Even on the second page, though it is a full page of text, I'm really surprised by how much of a difference using 3 columns and increasing the leading between the lines helps the readability here. In comparison with the jailbreaking article, this one is much more accessible. One thing I would change is the paragraph indents. This author used a typical 1/2-inch indent when he typed it in Word, and the designer left that. Instead of using a 1/2-inch indent, just space the first line of a paragraph 5 times. That way, when it's put into columns in the design, the paragraph doesn't start almost halfway across the column. So let's take a look at one last on-tap design. You already know what I like about this design. I love how big the photo is, and I just really like the photo overall. It's a great pop of color that would make most any reader stop and at least look. I would like to see a blurb about this article somewhere though. Some white text in the lower part of the left side could have said a little bit about what this article was going to say about Madeline Adams. The paragraphs are also interesting. I normally do my designs like this, with full spaces between paragraphs rather than just indents. On-tap editors should decide if they prefer the blank line or an indent so that some of the articles don't use one and others use the other design. Either one works in my opinion, but we do want to be consistent. The second and third pages, though, I'm feeling more of a penchant for the indent. Here I think it's almost too much white space because each paragraph is completely isolated by having space on either side and on top and bottom. Also on this spread, I'd like for the picture to be a little more interesting. Not necessarily the picture itself, but after having looked at Nylon's Regina Spektor article, I'd like for this photo to cover the first page and bleed over into the second. The top part of this picture, above everyone's head, could be cut out and the photo could be stretched through the first column of this second page. Then this pull-out quote could be moved or really deleted altogether. I hope you can see that as a magazine, though, our designs are evolving and becoming more interesting and more thoughtful. I hope that trend continues. As always, look to magazines you like to read. Figure out what it is about that magazine that you like visually. If you see a design that just completely stops you, try to pinpoint the characteristics that really catch your eye and adapt them for your own designs.